in a magazine interview, I was asked what the easiest vegetables were to grow. And for me, the number one easiest is always peppers. And it's probably because I live in such a hot, dry, windy location. Peppers to me are pretty much foolproof. However, that said, there are some mistakes that we can make in their culture and in their growth that I want to review today. So we'll talk about 5 mistakes you want to avoid in growing peppers. Well, I think mistake number 1 is limiting the spectrum of different kinds of peppers that you grow. There are so many different varieties that go well beyond just green peppers or sweet peppers. And so I think probably mistake number 1 is just not expanding your horizons and experimenting with different kinds of peppers. And that leads me to my question of the day, and that is, what is your favorite type of pepper to grow? Historically, I've grown jalapenos, cayennes, all sorts of different sweet peppers, banana peppers, poblano peppers, Anaheim peppers. What is your favorite kind to grow? Well, this year I'm trying some different ones that I have not grown before, though I have definitely enjoyed their delicacy in the kitchen. Number 1 being shishito peppers. I adore them, I adore eating them, I adore serving them as appetizers, and so I'm planting some of those. But I am also, these were grown from seed by my friend Monica, and these are 2 varieties. I think these both might be AAS selections from this year: chili pie pepper and sweet pepper dragonfly. So I've got a number of these that I'm getting ready to put into the ground. They're a little bit beaten up from the wind because it's been so windy, but that would be kind of my first mistake, and that's not expanding your horizon on the different kinds of peppers that you try to grow in your own garden. Well, this is something that I read about recently, and I want to be careful. In the past, I have often planted different varieties of peppers in close proximity to one another. And that kind of, I guess, creates a danger of cross-pollination, and I don't want them to happen. I don't want anything to affect the intense flavor of the individual type of peppers. So this year, I'm not going to make that mistake. I am going to separate them and grow them in different areas so that I avoid that kind of cross-pollination problem. And that doesn't mean that I can't grow some of them in containers and some of them in my garden bed so that I can kind of spread them around. Of course, I can also grow some of them as ornamentals because I think they can be really beautiful in the garden because the color of the fruit is just so wonderful. So that would be my number 2 mistake, is planting different varieties too closely in proximity to one another and having a danger of some kind of cross-pollination. Well, the third mistake, I think, would be thinking that you really only could grow peppers in a large garden bed or even in a small garden bed, because I have found that growing peppers in containers is just so easy. The other thing I would love to do is at some time do a whole pepper theater. I talked about this in my book, of just doing a whole assemblage of different kinds of peppers and aggregating them kind of in one space. These are those shishito peppers that I was telling you about. I have these just planted in buckets, then inserted into some of my Kobo baskets from QVC. But this way, these shishito peppers are separate from the rest of them, but they will do just beautifully in these containers. The other thing about container culture is if all of a sudden this area is too sunny and I need to move them into a shadier aspect or vice versa, then I can easily do that because I'm growing them in containers. And I've made sure that the soil is really fertile but not overly fertile. You'll also notice that I want to be really careful that squirrels don't get into them, and so I have these cloches from Gardener's Supply that I've got protecting them. So that is my number 3 mistake. Make sure that you try growing peppers in pots because it's just so easy. Well, number 4, I think, is kind of twofold, and that is not watering or feeding correctly. Now, definitely at the very outset, when I prepare my soil in the beds where peppers are going to grow, I make sure to use a balanced organic fertilizer. But also when I water, I'm doing it in a specific way, and that is that also is kind of twofold. Number one, when I water them in pots, I'm just using my handheld sprayer. But the one thing that it has in common with the watering that I'll be doing in my beds with drip irrigation is that I am going to water less frequently but more deeply, both for the peppers in the flower beds and also in pots, because that is the most effective way to get them to grow really well, really strong, and be as productive as possible. As always, it all depends kind of on where you grow them and how hot it gets where you are, but definitely you don't want to over or under water them, and watering less frequently but more deeply, that's hard for me to say, is the way to go. Now, Stuart pointed out another mistake that you don't want to make, and that is number one, scratching your eyes, or maybe number two, going to the bathroom when you have just sliced a jalapeno pepper for your fajitas. So that is Stuart's contribution to this little countdown. Okay, now let's go on to number 5. Oh my gosh, look at how beautiful this dill is coming along. And it smells divine, really, really divine. And I love the color, and I love the frilly, delicate little texture, but I digress. On to number 5 of don't make these 5 pepper mistakes. And of course, I have done these over and over and over again, but do as I say, not as I do. And that is not properly marking the different varieties of peppers that you plant. I don't know why it's so hard for me to get into my head. Maybe it's because sometimes the markers are like this, they're plastic, and I don't like the way they look, but that's no excuse. I really need to just be better about that. Shows that I'm kind of maybe not a real gardener, because a real gardener would always make sure that they marked the things that they planted. But definitely I'm going to try to be better about it this year, especially since I'm dry. I am growing different varieties than I have in the past, very specific varieties, just not broad categories like sweet peppers or jalapenos. So I'm going to make sure that this sweet pepper dragonfly has its marker in it. And now I'm going to give you a little bonus tip, a little bonus hint, maybe not a mistake, but another little hint that I just discovered recently. And here's my bonus piece of information. I just discovered this the other day. Now, like everything else, it is very individualized. It's very personal to you and how you garden. But that is when you harvest your peppers. So typically, I try for things like my jalapenos and some of my hotter peppers, I have historically always really harvested them when they were, I would say, mid-size. They weren't too small and they weren't too large. Now, the longer they stay on the plant, the more intense their heat will be, and I think sometimes maybe the tougher their skin will be. But I read the other day, I think it was in a cookbook, that sometimes if you go ahead and let them stay on long enough to actually crack, or I believe it was called corking. If I'm not correct, let me know on that. But where it really cracks, and then there's kind of a dry line running through the length of the pepper, that apparently can be a good sign if you want the most intense flavor. So don't pick them prematurely. Wait till they are old and crusty for maximum flavor. Let me know if you have discovered that as well. For me, that might be a little too hot, a little too pungent for me, and so I typically like to harvest them when they were a little bit less mature. The other thing is, don't grow things you won't eat. I don't care how beautiful they are. So in the past, because they are so gorgeous, and I love orange in the garden, I have grown habaneros. But then they were way too hot for me to eat. So that would be another freebie mistake. Don't grow peppers that are so hot or don't please your own palate. So there you go. There's my litany of pepper mistakes you want to avoid. Well, if you've held on this long, here is my outfit of the day. My earrings, I don't know where I got. They're just some of my hoops that I love to wear so much. My top came from Target. I mean, many years ago, probably 15 years ago. I love it. My breeches came from Amazon online. This is one of the most popular things that you guys ask about are these overalls, and I absolutely love them because they're so comfortable and they're really cool this time of year. And my boots are from Western Chief. These are really cute, and I like them because they're easy to get in and out of. Stuart, have I forgotten anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, there you go. There's my outfit of the day.